Hello again. It is suggested sometimes by those commenting here that I am some sort of heartless wretch and that I dislike or have no sympathy with refugees and asylum seekers. This is ridiculous. I grew up with and went to school with them. As a child and young adult, I was well aware of Britain's tradition of offering shelter to those in need, and I thought then and still think that it's a very fine thing. There were a number of waves of refugees in this country in the first 15 or 20 years after the end of the Second World War in 1945, and these people were all in desperate need of aid, and I'm very glad that it was provided to them. First, of course, were the Polish people, almost 200,000 of them, who had fought on our side against the Nazis but dared not return to their own country when the Russians took over. In 1947, the Polish Resettlement Act was passed in Parliament, which granted the members of the Polish armed forces and their families the right to live in Britain. I'll give a link to this in the description to this video. We sometimes forget that some of those people, that is to say, relatives of the members of the Free Polish Army, actually came to Britain in 1948 on the Empire Windrush. I went to school with a number of children of such families, and I can still recall their names today. Marcelo Andruszkiewicz, Rochelle Zelinsky, Irving Chekovich, and all the rest of them. Older viewers may recall that one of the original characters in Coronation Street in 1960 when it began was Ivan Choretsky, who was Polish and married Elsie Tanner's daughter. Those Polish refugees settled in amicably to their adopted country and became just like everybody else. We owed them a debt and did the right thing by them, and they repaid us with gratitude and good behaviour. Much the same thing happened in 1956 in the wake of the Hungarian uprising, when the Soviets suppressed the revolution in Hungary. Britain took around 25,000 refugees from Hungary, and they similarly assimilated to life here. In 1961, there was a slightly different case, that of the refugees from Tristan da Cunha. This is a small island in the South Atlantic, which is a British possession. In 1961, a volcano on Tristan da Cunha erupted, and all 264 of the inhabitants were offered refuge in Britain. They were very grateful. They came here, stayed for 2 years, and then went back to their own country. All this is very different indeed from the situation today. For one thing, there was no doubt at all in anybody's mind that these people were refugees and that they could not return to their own countries. Then too, they were a mixed bunch, young and old, families with children, men and women. 90% of the current crop of refugees are young men. There is often no clear reason why they cannot return to their own country, and even when that is the case, they are already in a safe and well-to-do European country where they are able to claim protection under international law, that is to say, France. The fact that these young men make hazardous voyages in small boats across one of the busiest shipping routes in the world suggests to me that they are actually putting themselves in danger voluntarily. They could claim asylum in France, but decline to do so. That so many of them destroy their documents before embarking on the journey is a highly suspicious circumstance in itself. Another point to remember is that those previous groups of asylum seekers were strictly limited in number. There were just 264 people from Tristan da Cunha, all of whom returned to their own country when conditions there improved. There were only 25,000 Hungarians. We see more than that number arriving here across the Channel every year. There is something else to consider, and that is when large numbers of refugees have come in the past, they usually spread out and assimilate with the British people rather than forming self-contained communities, which tend to look a bit like ghettos. The 200,000 Polish people who came here in the late 1940s were scattered all over the place in Scotland, Northern England, London, and 100 other parts of the country. They didn't form Polish communities or insist on living with other Polish people or having their own shops selling Polish food. They integrated with the British. So it was in Ilford in the 1950s, which was at that time a town in Essex. The Andrewskeviches lived in one street, the Zelenskys lived about a mile away, and Chekoviches had a flat somewhere else. They simply mixed in with everybody else. They and their children spoke English publicly, and they all did their best to become as British as anybody else. We do not see this attitude these days among newcomers to this country. The refugee problem that we have now is completely different, both qualitatively and quantitatively, from anything at all which has been seen in the past in Britain.